getting back to the topic at hand, bunker construction and maintenance, it is something that we have thought about a lot for over 2 decades, and it gives us the opportunity to ask this question here in this presentation. This is what it's about. How do I build, or you build, a bunker for the least cost that is also the least expensive to maintain over time? How do you get the best bang for your buck? What's the best value? How much should I put in at construction and expect to get out of this in savings over long term? Do I spend a lot more during the front end in construction and assume that, or hope that I can save a lot more afterwards? So what we're going to do is look at some basic considerations and then get to some case studies in here and try to just think through this thing and see if you can come away with any ideas about this. To start off, we've got to look at the 2 basic types of bunkers. Really, bunkers fall into 2 categories, and they are different in the way they're maintained and different in the way in how much they cost to be maintained. So the first one is a cop bunker, which is basically cutting a hole, a pit in the ground, and throwing the soil up around the outside, raking it out, creating generally a steep face on the angle, often on the angle of repose that the material will allow. There's a bunker in a Newport country called Rhode Island, or a golf hole called the Cop Hole, because of a huge bunker with a raised face that's brought up out of the ground to protect the next tee. So this is Lawsonia Links of Wisconsin by William Langford, his quintessential work, and you can see how they cut a basin out on the floor and threw all the material up into the face of that bunker there. And that is this right here. That's all cut and fill in place, easy back slope, very steep faces. And it's interesting to see the earthworks. The sand has been replaced with grass, so that's where the turf is pretty much right where the sod, where the sod is where the sand used to be. And up at the green, on the approach to the green actually, on this par 5, you can see the same thing was done into that hillside. So cop bunker can be flat ground or cut into the face of the slope as well. Cop bunker can be cut in to, as we said, creating a steep face, but also building up the material for the green itself. The cutting and filling in the green site. And that's one of the things about good architecture. It should use the material available right there and make use of it. One of the reasons these old courses look so good and people love them over time and never get tired of them is because they look good in the ground. They're not artificial clumps or artificial proportions of dirt thrown in on top of the ground. They look good in their place. So you can do it to raise the green. You can also cut pits and have not much of a berm there, but then also create a berm here in this early 1900s Donald Ross course in Philadelphia. You can see the cop is raised up above the grade, or a pit cut down into the ground. So that's the basic cop bunker. The other kind is a sand dune, or maybe an eroded sand dune kind of a bunker. And that's what you'll find out at Cypress Point. This is in its restored state with all the irregularities, fingers coming in, sand faces up, way up on a mound like this. And they used the old photographs to restore this golf course. A lot of it was done in-house and very irregular, and you can see why it's called, we're calling it an eroded sand dune, the 15th at Cypress there. And then at Bandon Trails by Corin Crenshaw, this kind of bunkering is all the rage now. People are really getting into Alistair Mackenzie, really getting into this kind of naturalized bunkering. It seems like every architect is doing this now. And this is very inexpensive to maintain. You can get your mowers up real close with a minimum of fly mowing around them. Short grass everywhere to take into account slopes and let the ball roll into the hazard. And they're really not very expensive at all to maintain, especially if you're willing to put up with some of this kind of stuff. And on this kind of course, it's very acceptable. People fly into this place from all over the US and all over the world. And they love this golf course. Is just fantastic. So a lower maintenance bunker doesn't necessarily mean a low prestige or a low impact or low popularity. Our friend Gil Hance from Philly did the Boston Golf Club. These kinds of bunkers give an opportunity for a lot of good artistry, and he's done a really good job. This is very easy to maintain, a little tough on top shots, but that's what you do. You know, it's a little par 3. Most people are getting well beyond all the schmutz in the foreground there. So you can have a good level of playability, good artistry, and a low level of maintenance as well. This is where it all started. Riviera in 1925, this look. And the architects out in California did this. George Thomas Mackenzie, Billy Bell that moved from Pittsburgh or Canonsburg out in 1909. He got involved with Mackenzie and George Thomas out there. But this is what people are copying nowadays, is George Thomas bunkering. Dalhousie in Missouri, Jack Nicklaus, used this look on that golf course. When we put in the rear bunker had been taken out, we used this very photograph to put that in and also to restore the bunker in the middle of this green on the 6th hole there. Front bunker wasn't done. They found these photographs after Corin Crenshaw redid all the bunkers at one time, and it was time to do other work after that. But that's an eroded sand. And if you go into George Thomas's book, the 1927 Golf Architecture in America, they show a photo of this bunker before the sand was put in, and the note that he put under the photograph was, note the edges of the bunker configured to portray erosion. So go to your club, go to your members, say, hey, we want to put in bunkers that look like they're eroded, and I think you'll get real popular real fast. So you got to use your terminology right. That won't work. Okay, what's the easiest bunker to maintain in the world? That's it right there. There really isn't an easy bunker to maintain unless you have a flat disc of sand sitting right at grade and you run your riding mowers around it and then run a trap rake in, and it drops maybe a max of 1 inch into the sand, and you zip around there and rake the edge. That's the easiest one to maintain. But those kind of bunkers aren't acceptable, so we got to look at something else. You know, so you're going to have bunkers that are either grass faced or sand flashed, and we looked at that kind of thing a little bit, but let's explore that a little further. How high do you bring the grass up, or the sand up, or do you bring the grass way down? What's cheaper to maintain? A lot of people are going away from, or have been in recent years, and the USGA in their visits have often been recommending people just pull the grass down. But I've seen projects where grass-faced bunkers are actually more expensive to maintain than a sand flash, and there's a lot of things that determine what's the best for you. So let's go through some of those and look at some examples. Salem Country Club, Massachusetts, big honking berms built up of field stone and deep grass face with very little sand moving up the face. They're almost flat. Then you get to another part of that golf course just after the sod and sand was put in a number of years ago. And you can see on the face, the face of sand is, on the face, the sand is creeping up on the embankment a little bit, maybe as high as 1/3 up the face. Then you go to another one. This is a course we did at Athens Country Club in Georgia. Notice the event going on here. The one thing I want to point out here is there's a number of people wearing orange there. Now, they hate the University of Florida so much, they don't sell any orange or almost none. Everything's black and red and white in that club. This is, people wearing clothes like that there is like somebody selling maize and blue here down the hall, expecting to get anything except run out of town. But that's a Georgia foursome there. That's where they play golf all the time. But it's club championship. And what they've got here is a combination grass and sand flash and spots. And they built a bunker here, and you'll see the cost later. They're basically called a billy bunker with a layer of stone and a geotextile fabric over the entire bunker floor and 4 to 5 inches of sand on top of that. So we're going to explore some of this also. So, but just as high, analyzing how high the sand goes. This is obviously Bermuda grass, but looking at how high do you bring the sand to keep it maintainable and reduce the amount of mowing that you have to do. You pop down to William Flynn in Miami Beach at Indian Creek, you've got very high sand flash. These bunkers are 6 to 6.5 feet deep. You can tell by the height of the flag stick there. And these do not wash out. And we'll see how they were stabilized a little later. But you've got sand way up at the top, very high, but a very simple shaped bunker with not much edging. Now with Bermuda grass, obviously you're going to have to do hard edging. And that's another issue I want to talk about as well. Dick Wilson learned from William Flynn at the hole in the wall in Naples. It's that same sand flash, but he went to a more ornate bunker that he's starting to go back to that eroded sand dune look. Well, here you've got bunkers that are not as deep and the propensity for washouts aren't as great, but you've got all these edges to do, and to maintain that look over time takes a lot of careful work. So bunkers aren't as deep here as they were the other one we saw, but a lot more ornateness built in and more modern architecture than Indian Creek was 1929. This was 1957. So back to some basic, thinking this through, some basic pot bunkers with a very steep grass face, and the ball never stays on that. It rolls back into here. Not very large. So you've got that. The intense maintenance is in the sand and that face. Pretty much that's all the intense maintenance there is. Bold statement, simple bunkers, but getting a little more ornate grass-faced bunker with some fingers coming in, so a little more to mow around it, a little more hand mowing. Longer face, bigger bunker, just after sod and sand was placed there. Lake Sunapee, New Hampshire, now you've got sand creeping up a little bit higher on the face, but not so much that it washes out, but you still have a pretty good amount of grass to maintain on those faces. But that's really what that course looked like, considered probably the best course in New Hampshire. Nice place. And then out on the West Coast, the Peninsula Golf and Country Club, the sand can get higher than that because the frequency of rain, the heavy rain events don't happen very much there, and the frequency is a lot less out there than it would be in New Hampshire, the East, or especially down in Florida. And some of the gully washes we get here in Pennsylvania, between Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the whole mid-Atlantic all the way over, we can get some pretty good rains as well. And as last October proved, you get a lot of them in a short amount of time. So you might not want to raise your sand very high, but out in California, it works because they just don't get the heavy rains there that often. It'll still happen, but not often. So drainage is going to determine how expensive or reasonable it is to maintain your bunkers, and either the failure of it or just the lack thereof. And those are the two problems you have in drainage on the negative side. So you've got problems with a bunker that doesn't drain. You've got golf ruling problems in an event, a club championship or some event, regional championship, whatever it is, USGA. You've got problems during tournaments. You've got maintenance costs that are going up. You've got annoyed golfers, and that's the bottom line, is you don't want, that's what you're serving. We're all here to serve the customer. So you get some soils, such as in Georgia, where it's red clay. You get that, if a lack of drainage brings that water up, forms a pool in the bunker, up here and down there. And then when the water recedes, it leaves, it's contaminated material sitting on top of your nice bunker sand. And it can happen up here as well as down there, but especially down in the Carolinas and Georgia, you get that clay. Now here's something that's really got to be watched out for. I believe you can see this dark grass rim here and the light grass inside. This is a berm of built up sand that's preventing this bunker from just surface draining after heavy rain. We see this all the time in maintenance, as sand pros zipping around and spewing sand out sideways, and especially the dust, it just gathers there over time. You don't notice it, but it builds up enough to hold the water there. On an uphill bunker, we want to see this be a straight run from here right out to the surface here, or just a drop of an inch or so to minimize that. You don't have to build up a big berm in construction to keep the sand in. If that sand is flat in this low end of the bunker, it's not going to roll out there. You just have to have about a 1-inch rise there, and so it's very important in construction. You want to save money over time, make sure the details are done on the bottom of the bunker here. And make sure the water is kept out at the top of the bunker. In this case, it runs off the green, and it doesn't take a berm, a buildup of 6 to 9 inches of material, of soil there. All it takes is a slight slope away of maybe 2 to 3%. That's all it takes, just to get the water to just not run into the bunker from off the green. So it doesn't, just do a tilt away, don't build up a big berm. That increases your maintenance. So good drainage. Ed McCoy talked about the the slope interceptors, or we call them curtain drains, and that's what's going in over this green site that's being entirely rebuilt. Bunkers, green, everything. And this inlet's going to capture a lot of water near the steps coming way downhill into this green site. And the interceptor drain in this case, and what we usually like to see. This is important, these things, because what you invest here is going to save you money down here. So 20 mil, 30 mil plastic under the bottom of the trench and right up the downhill side of it, near the top, fill it with stone and cover it with soil. You're looking to capture groundwater. If you capture groundwater around your bunkers, which is the topic today, you're going to be handling a lot of your other problems that you have. Groundwater captured is the most efficient way to handle rain events, because if your soil isn't saturated, that water is going to run off and soak in also very readily. The problem is under the ground most of the time, not what lands on top of the ground in rain events. You want to overdo it if you have to, if you will, on the amount of drainage that you put in your bunkers. And here at the Kirtland Country Club up in Cleveland, in Willoughby, the fairway bunker in the 8th hole, there's adequate drainage placed in here, and especially across the face. Some cases, these lateral lines may need to go way up in here. Depending on how much flashing there is, this is very little flashing of the sand. And that's Enkamat over the top. That's a good investment to separate your sand and keep it clean from the stone if it should migrate up. The equipment that one uses is important. Ditch witch doesn't work that well. If you really want your drain lines to be adequate, just get in there with a small hoe. You can see it doesn't take huge equipment, huge expense to get the drain lines cut in properly. And sometimes you may be in a big mucky mess. This is in South Jersey, in Haddonfield at Tavistock, and it's actually called liquid soil in spots in this course. A spring popping out from underneath the green had to be captured, not above the point as Ed said, but at the seepage area itself. And then just as sloppy as your bunker drainage looks, if it looks this bad, don't worry about it. It's going to be covered with sand. Just get it in there and get a lot of it in there. Contractors don't like it to look like that, but just hurry up before your members show up and just put a bunch in, so they don't start complaining on you. In Florida, in Indian Creek, this is a bunker project done in the mid-90s. This is not enough drainage installed. There ought to be more. We had to come back and rethink the thing, and later on, more drainage was added onto this in a subsequent project. In Florida, they rebuild everything about every 10 years. Everything changes down there all the time, and the weather is so severe at times, things don't stay around like they do up here. So that's not quite where it should be. But even a small bunker, back on that liquid soil site, you've got looks like enough drainage for a little bunker. I would say that's enough drainage, but if you're going to miss high. The water around the bunker, this is a very famous golf course that put a trough around the bunker. This should be done better than that. It may keep the water out, but if you bridge this instead of cutting into that ridge, you just shed the water sideways. You don't need, for drainage around a bunker, you don't need to do grotesque looking things to get your water out of the bunker. You just got to nurse or nudge water sideways a little bit. You don't have to build a moat. It's not necessary. Now, looking at some costs. We looked at how high do you bring the sand? Do you keep it low? What do I do? What's the proper bunker style for my course? Is it a flash bunker? Do I work with that? Do I have to work with it? Does my course and the people at the course, do they want grass face? There's various things that you got to consider. One of them is the basic cost. So up in the Northeast, these are real numbers from real projects. Semi-grass face with a grass liner, which is really the same way, just saying a sodded floor. That's $5.10 a square foot. Another one in the Northeast, semi-grass face, which means the sand rides up the face, maybe a third, a half, maybe a little more at points, with the sodded floor. And just the highest faces on that bunker get a synthetic liner. And that jumps up to $630 then. And that's only partial, it's on the high flashes. In the Deep South, this is that Athens, Georgia project. You've got the grass face with synthetic liner there, and that's with a 2-inch layer of stone under the liner as well. That's only roughly $5. They did a lot of bunkers at one time. The soil there is like concrete. It is like orange concrete. It's unbelievable how hard that Georgia clay is. But because of the volume, they got that price. And it was very competitive bidding nowadays. Now, in the Midwest, a grass face with the Enkamat over it, the drainline, like what we saw at Kirtland Country Club, that's just under $5 a square foot. If you go way down in Florida with sandy soil, flash bunkers, the price really drops because of the material you're working with. You can see it's a good drop. High volume bunker project here and here between Florida and Georgia, and you can see the price is significantly less in Florida. Now, way out on the West Coast, and I'll show you an example of this, there's something going on there that some people are starting to use this stuff called Stalok. It's clay soil, which is really probably 70% silt, actually, it seems like. It's a silty clay. And grass-faced bunkers with some flashing, and you already saw one of the bunkers out there. And that's a measly little $10.50 a square foot. $3 of that cost is in the Stalok, and I'll show you what that is in a minute here. So a couple case studies. This is applicable to the Midwest, Ohio area, even though it is in Rhode Island, because they use bluegrass all around the bunkers. It's about the only course in New England that uses bluegrass around their bunkers entirely. So it's a Donald Ross course from 1914. It's been a perennial top 100, and very well known place. They got a really good price. $672K for 105 bunkers. We put some back in. One or two came out, and it came out to almost to the penny, $6,400 per bunker. Yes?
Is that a construction cost or renovation cost?
Oh, this is a bunker restoration. Every bunker redone. Yeah. Some changed, some really kept close. They got a good price. Landscapes Unlimited did it. And this is a rather large bunker there, and it shows at the stage where it's ready for the pipe and the stone in the trenches and the sand and sod to be placed there. Now this that you see is the geotextile fabric sand trapper 2, most likely, only on the highest flashes, and these funny looking shark teeth where they were there. And that's what he did. I mean, everybody thinks Donald Ross only does bunkers with the grass down. That's kind of a myth that has developed over the years. But very large carry bunker right off the tee. So you can see the kind of construction, the work area that they had to do and the extent to which they had to put the geotextile fabric. Everywhere you don't see white is simply the sand goes on top of the soil that you see around the trenches. The finished product there, some real high flashes, some funky, weird shaping and things. This is a new bunker that was put in along with some new mounds because the Northeast Amateur guys are bombing it over these bunkers, so they needed to restore the design intent by getting new hazards further from the tee and maybe a hair closer to the fairway than others were. Cross bunkers by Ross, real interesting place, and with the shaping and the cross bunkers. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, bluegrass all the way around, and a lot of work done. By the way, they got mounds included in the 600 and 72,000 in that cost. And then the sand flash really high. This is directly. We worked directly from a 1929 photo. Sand is really high. It does not wash out, and on those faces, from this point upward, is the geotextile fabric. And in here too, but not here. This is about the only fescue on the whole golf course that touches sand. There's very little of it. Okay, now another case study. Country Club of York, getting closer to Ohio. York, Pennsylvania, really good Donald Ross golf course. And their project was $570,000 for only 59 bunkers, and it totaled a little bit under $9,700. And you'll see in a minute why. It's a much hillier site. The bunkers are spread apart at this site compared to Wannamoyset. And the bunkers, each bunker themselves, on average, the bunkers on average are larger than they are at Wannamoyset. Wannamoyset has big ones and real little ones. So this is the construction that you see. The stone is in the trench, a lot of drainage installed. The stone is up to the surface in this photo, so that if it rains before the sand can be installed and they can finish the job, they can scrape off any silt that washes into the drain tiles, just scoop that stone off and get rid of that. It protects the drains underneath. So you hump up the stone a little bit, and then before the sand is placed, you got to come in and recess this. We like to see at least 3 inches of recess down. That gets that stone down there, and that really preserves your bunker and really helps with the, pickiness of your members and any costs associated with it. You'll also notice that the sod goes down the bank and right to the floor of the bunker. That's the edge right there. I think you can see that from where you're sitting. That's the 4 to 5, possibly 6-inch lip that's cut in there. We always put the sod right down there, whether it's bluegrass, fescue, even Bermuda, because you're going to edge that out in Bermuda anyway, and the rooting of the Bermuda helps stabilize the sand in there. You'll see a note on that, or a photo on that in a little bit. But that's the way those things are done to really maintain the golf course, because to really maintain that bunker and keep golf course maintenance costs down, we like to see no hard edging on bunkers. That's what we go after. And what Chad and Darrell mentioned yesterday was the sod going down and no hard edging going on. That's something that we feel really helps in the long-term maintenance. It keeps the integrity of the design. You just cut off the runners. You don't have to go through the trouble of all the hard edging. You don't leave a hard edge of exposed soil for the soil to fall out and rain and whatnot and collapse into the sand. It keeps the sand much cleaner. And you only have soil touching sand underneath. Nothing where gravity can have any effect and hurt the integrity of your bunker sand. So the sand trapper 1 was laid on the floors, and where the sand went up the face a little bit, sand trapper 2, this is about twice as thick, went there. You'll notice, as Chad talked also yesterday about the pneumatic staple drivers there, they've got a handle built onto this thing. And there's the one, the 25-pounder that wore people out in about an hour, I guess is what the duration was. And then there's a handle. I think they got this from Denmark or some crazy place. It was custom made, but it helped a lot. And you are going to have to put at least one staple, at least 1 1/4 staples probably per square foot of bunker in there. So you've got a lot of staples going in. So you better make sure you're not wearing your people out too much. And that's the finished product on that very hole. The sand up on the face a bit. Quintessential Ross green. Pretty cool place. And now out in California, I want to show you something with this Stalok. Some people in the East may consider doing this. It's very expensive, but this bunker construction method with using the Stalok material lasts a long time. They've done it at Pebble Beach. They've done it at a number of courses out there with high flash sand, and you can use the Stalok for flat card paths too to stabilize more of a granular material, a soft card path. It works there as well. So the cost, as we saw before, $750 plus the 3 makes it $1,050 a square foot. We rebuilt the whole course in the early 2000s. They weren't being maintained properly before the current superintendent, Frank Zamazel, got there. He came from, he's the guy that upgraded Spyglass Hill a number of years ago. And they got him there, and he started saying, we need to do something about this. The soil out there is horrendous. It's like moon dirt. It's a silty, grayish brown or brownish gray gunk. You can't get the water in, you can't get the water, it's really tough stuff, and that's ryegrass on it. And they were just deteriorating after not too many years. So in 2009, Frank got this renovation project going. So this is the steps for it. The bunker's demolished, new material brought in and plated all around in the proper shaping. The sand edge painted. We like blue paint. Did Jim use blue out there? It's used red. But blue shows up really well on a lot of soils. And so the shaping was done for the most part, and then the edge was put in there so that you could come in and cut the edge. The edge was painted, and you can cut the edge. Now what this guy's doing is he's got a lath strip getting that angle of repose slope. Because you put it, material wants to sit on a straight slope. It does naturally. A lot of bunkers get built where the bunker is bulging on the face, and the steepest part of the bunker is at the bottom. And the reason that happens is the bottom of the bucket on the track hoe, they're compacting the face. And the further out you reach, what happens? The steeper the bottom of the bucket angle gets, the angle on the bottom. So as they reach over, it gets steeper and steeper, and what you end up with is what we derogatorily call a bulgy face bunker, rather than the angle of repose. And that's why he's got the lath strip. And this slope right here, under this shovel handle, that will get straightened out. That's not flat enough. That's a Pete Dye brought back. It's this natural angle of repose bunker slope, and it's very difficult to get in the field, and it doesn't matter how experienced the contractor is, we got to sit on them all the time, and that saves money because if these slopes get steep at the bottom on that rounded face, this stuff is hard to mow. You're reaching further down on the angle of the fly mower, whatever you're using, gets steeper and steeper. It can get dangerous even. So this actually saves money by putting some money up front, making sure the contractor understands this kind of shaping is absolutely what will be demanded there. So the Stalok material is a paraffin polymer, and they mixed it with a decomposed granite. That's the problem, is finding the right material to mix the polymer with, the Stalok with. And it's porous, but it clods together, and it works. It packs, but is really porous. So here the material has been made, the trenches are there, and there's actually, around the trenches, there's plastic liner under the stone and up the side of the trench and lapped over the edge a little bit. So you see where the compaction is on both sides here? That's the Stalok material compacted over the plastic liner as well. That's the only liner, plastic, impervious plastic that's on this project. They're putting the Stalok all around, including up the edge of the bunker, and even just a couple inches or 3 inches over the top. They did not lap the sod down here to the floor of the bunker because the Stalok is so stable. And it's checked, compacted by hand, checked for the depth with the probe. And there you see the steps where they've sodded over the one side of the trench. They've Stalok soiled over the side of the trench, and the other side's waiting for that to happen, applying the Stalok all the way around. Partial treatment with the I guess it was Sand Trapper 2, I believe that's what they used in this case as well, over the face, excluding the edge, as we said, and some very neat and clean drainage. And you can see why this is $10.50 a square foot. It's double what you're going to get pretty much around here. It's with the standard methods that we tend to use in this area. And you can see the sod goes right to the edge, the pound in the sod, and all the basic things that are done to get a bunker ready. Their 18th hole, just before sod and sand. You can see the trenches are recessed. As we said, that's a real maintenance saver. Plus a maintenance saver is getting those trenches cut across, up on the face. Sometimes even getting guys to dig them by hand way up on the face may be necessary. But then after that, the sand with a rake handle slope, that angle of repose slope, and everything's hunky-dory. And these bunkers look really the same 2 years, 3 years later. And that's how they have to maintain them, though. They don't want to have any mechanical, even though they got the Stalok in there, they're not putting any mechanical trap rakes in there. These bunkers are going to last a long time. But again, if they could use mechanical equipment here, which they do in a couple of bunkers, it would save more money. So there's something that we have looked into, and it started for the treatment of the bunker floors that we've looked into. And it started here in the northeast corner of Westchester County, New York. It's so expensive to live there. They couldn't get maintenance help to live. Can't get enough guys to live in the area. They got to bust them in or something. They just can't get enough laborers. So they said, we need to rebuild our bunkers. What in the world are we going to do with these? How are we going to maintain these things with this light crew? So the USGA rep is no longer working there, not for this reason. He went on to other things in research. But he suggested to put a grass liner or sod the floors of the bunkers. So this has become something that we're doing a lot nowadays. And you can see this one fairway bunker, while the sod's still being laid, and there's sod throughout the whole bottom, right up the edge and right over the top. That bunker was redone the same way. The sand flashes on some of these. It's being called a semi-flash. It's not flashed everywhere. And this is what's going on here. It's a fescue blue blend here and bluegrass here. We're doing the same thing in Winchester, Massachusetts, near Boston, and we're just simply using the same sod throughout because there's no difference between the 75% fescue, 25 blue sod and the blue sod itself. But get a cheaper sod if you have it, put it on the floor, And the reason the different colors are here is because it's been sprayed with Roundup. The trenches are recessed nicely again, and this is all ready for sand. They even got caught in late year. Before they could put the Roundup, they had to put the sand in before the Roundup could be applied. The fall of construction, wrapping up the following spring. The grass is growing up through the sand. They just sprayed Roundup right over the top of the sand and went right into it and took care of the same, handled the grass underneath the sand exactly in the same manner, just as effective. So this is what we're doing. We're doing this at Country Club of Buffalo now, this coming fall. Slews of bunkers, buku square feet and flash bunkers in spots, and it really is cost effective. Another thing for cost effectiveness is getting that drain line up on the sand flash portion of the bunker and across the bottom. Sometimes it may require 2 main lines running across a bunker instead of just one. And these bunkers are not dished continuously. They're flat bottom for the most part. We'll see something about that in a second. Case study, northern Midwest, the North Shore Country Club in Mequon, Wisconsin, just north of Milwaukee. The superintendent described this look that they had to maintain as pristine. The grass around it, the edging, required that the sand looked absolutely perfect. And we were able to upgrade the design, add more bunkers, add a lot of linear feet of edging, which they don't do much of, and keep the cost of the maintenance exactly the same. So the course went from this to this. And this is the look that they have now. Semi-flash, there's some geotextile in a few spots under there, but a much different looking golf course, totally different from just the big clover leaf thing with some mounds around it to something that is totally unique in the Milwaukee area. And as I said, more bunkers, more linear feet to edge, and their bunker costs did not go up at all. I like the way the guy parked. That's good. That's a nice touch. Right in the way we need to take a photo too. But at any rate, another one, there's some severe flashing on some of these bunkers, and even an island of grass in a spot. And touches like that, things that really look impressive to people, and there's no maintenance increase here. We did eliminate some bunkers and took away severe mounds. Another spot on the course, and their ninth hole, they have 3 9s there, and they're waiting to get some money together to do the other 9s. It's been a while, but you can get pretty ornate and not spend a truckload of money, and it's all bluegrass again. So, flash bunker with a liner in Philadelphia. These bunkers are flash. You can see how incredibly high that face is and steep. That does not wash out. It's got the 3/4 inch thick liner, synthetic liner, on the face, but it does not wash out. These liners are very effective. One of the reasons that we like the sod floor on the bunkers mixed with the liners on the steep faces, combining those two, is if you have a geotextile fabric underneath the sand, it can, we've all heard it, something can grab it and pull it up. It doesn't happen with the sod. It does root in a little bit before you spray the Roundup on if you give it a little bit of time. And if sand gets thin, if somebody hits that, they're not going to ruin it. It happens to hit the liner, which is sod, they're not going to injure themselves. And there's no big problem with this big sheet of stuff coming up from underneath, and you got to open up a big area of the bunker to repair it. It's just a very small thing. The sod, if I were building a golf course, I would put the grass on the floor. I would consider not putting stone in the bunkers. I put sand all the way around because the slots, I talked to Ed before, the slots on your standard perforated drains are so narrow, they're about 1/8 of an inch. Not much sand gets in there, and even if a pipe fills up half, let's say it did, it's still got that capacity, is a half a pipe cross section is still more than enough to carry the water out. Now you don't want that to be that. We'd like to have it totally open. However, I feel, and we know a superintendent in Eastern PA that did it for years, no sand ever in his no stone ever in his bunkers, just sand, and it worked out really well for him. But I think that probably saves over time too. The cheapest bunker to maintain is hardly any grass around it, getting the sand up all the way close to the top, and having sand that is stable. That's the tricks. Minimize, eliminate the amount you have to mow, and get the sand that's really stable, and stabilize it. One of the ways to stabilize it is to create a flat floor in the bunker, and then on the edge, then quickly flash it up on the outside edge. Bunkers wash out, not so much on these quick faces that are a short run, but they wash out where you have, you know, a 15% slope, a 20% slope on a long, for the entire bunker. That's when the sand fills up with water. It can't hold its own weight, and the whole thing sloughs down, and bunkers erode from underneath, not on top. When that sand escapes, slides down, then it starts scouring the floor, and that's where the problem is. And the projects where you'll find where the floor of the bunker is built as flat as possible, as broadly as possible, and then quickly up, they are stable. And that's the key, is getting stable sand. That's why you use the liners to stabilize the sand on the faces. And for the other reasons mentioned for the sod is why that seems to make sense. Now back in Florida, those high flash bunkers you saw before, this is putting the material on the face, and that's the only area that it covered, and it just ends right here. We used to think it had to go into a trench along here, and it doesn't. It doesn't gather and wash out the sand in a delta kind of a formation at the bottom. It doesn't do that. The greens were regrassed, and all the bunkers restored around this green. You can see the extent of the drainage, the extent of the geotextile fabric. And along the edge of the bunker there, sand has already been placed in, but the details aren't finished in this photograph because the geotextile fabric comes up, and the Bermuda sod, it will go down over the edge, and it can root through there. But they will then edge just inside this liner in here. So that works. You can see the work going on. The green as well, and that's not our region here, but this is Philadelphia, the same kind of thing being done at Philly Country, the high flash bunker. So it works for this area, the same spec. Now where maintenance goes wrong, recognize that, Dave? Oh, that was probably before you got there. Where maintenance goes wrong is when you got no money to maintain anything, first of all. But this is the thing that's been a bug in our minds for many years, as we mentioned before, is getting away from this, having bunkers you don't have to edge. If you hard edge, you're generally not the highest skilled labor on the site. And it tends to get very rounded. Some of the design the design almost always gets destroyed through edging, hard edging, because it just keeps going up every year. And it tends to smooth off and round off, make it look like cookie cutter bunkers, some design details that may be really important for the look of that course. So this changes the design, and it just, by just simply edging out bunkers over and over again where they wear out, sand splashing, grass drying out on the edge, whatever it is, simply edging makes them harder to maintain the following year than they were the previous year before the edging. So not having a hard edging on a bunker saves money and the integrity of the golf course as well, which is very important. It can get really bad sometimes. That's pretty bad soil over there. And this is where it starts with running through, and just, that's a great bunker, isn't it? Nice and flat. But some of those are important sometimes to have those kinds of bunkers also. But this is where it all starts, the dust flying around, and it's changing things. And eventually you get to this. So, lessons learned. In drainage, go a little more. You're going to save money over time. Stabilize the sand. Get the floors flat and choose the proper sand. The sands that people are selling nowadays are really good. They're really stable. Everybody's concerned about pentrometer readings and keeping things so that, you know, the ball sits nicely on the surface. So the sand choices are really good. And liners, use them with good choices, with good intelligent thinking through the issues at hand. But the style of your bunker, do you need the liners or not? Do you want to go with sod on the floor? Do you want synthetics all over? Whatever. And minimize the grass mowing. Get the sand as high as you can that fits the style of your course. Minimize the mowing on those slopes above the sand. Minimize edging or eliminate it. And what's going to be a factor also is the type of grass or sod that you're putting around the bunkers. Ohio has almost no fescue around bunkers, but you should see that in Massachusetts, when fescue is put around those bunkers up there, that stuff sits there for 70 years and those bunker edges barely move. You don't have the stones growing in, rhizomes and all this growing into the sand with the fescue clumps on the edge, and they can stay very stable. But so the region matters. your weather patterns, rainfall. Can your region handle the fescues that are lower maintenance? Wisconsin down here, it's almost all blue, as we said. The type of soil you got, you're going to have rocky soils. You may need a liner just for that. You may not need a liner if you've got good soils there. And we want to see superintendent input. The superintendent and the architect are communicating, and the green committee as well. If they're communicating together, you can nail down these issues, get the thing done with the least cost for the longest term benefit possible. Understand your course, understand what the client wants, and the superintendent's got to have input on how he's going to maintain this, and we've all got to have an understanding about what is going to be the end result and when it gets started. But then there is no one solution because all these factors involved. You got to work through this thing. So we don't have one answer here. We tried to give you a bunch of things to think about, some factors that you should weigh one over the other about how high the sand should be, what kind of liner, if any, and all those kinds of things. And are there any questions?